In the book, there's a lot about words. There's a lot about letters and words appear everywhere. There's a feeling that many of the words are from old and ancient places. And so I was very interested that the font and that the cover would reflect some of that. I think that's captured in the blue and gold. The gold effect, the gold embossed font and writing. I like the fact that the sword is full of light. The crows, I think, have been captured really well. And even the stones, the roads are made up of stones, and often they'll have letters, single letters carved into them. And that's shown on the cover as they float around the sword, which is not something I wrote, but it captures the feel of many things that happen. I particularly like the framing, which was from the opening few pages of the story. A character called the Wayfarer holding up his staff as if he wants to be struck by lightning. The visual there is almost exactly how I saw it in my head. So that's with the hosts of crows, the lightning, the dark, and one man standing down the forces of evil. So that's great. Mrs. Lazybee's cottage was where the storytelling started. And often when people read the book, they say it's their favourite. It actually was quite technically difficult for me to write, to try and capture. When I reread it, I sometimes worry I haven't done it well. Those who've read the book, so it's really good. I really like the opening scene. I particularly like the Wayfarer, the character of the Wayfarer. And I like the Wayfarer's hut, personally. I like the Wayfarer's hut where the travellers receive the help they need. But there's so many battles. I also like the parts, particularly where Jill is in the middle of a crisis and the answer comes and she has what she needs to meet the situation. There's a particular point where she's embarrassed because she has to start singing something, and I always feel some sympathy with her when I reread that part. So yeah, I have some favourite parts, and they're mainly those parts. Wayfarer's hut, Mrs. Lazybee's, places in the battles where Jill, in spite of herself, has to do what she needs to do and finds that she has the strength to do it. That one's quite difficult to explain. In one way, it was due to sitting down at a keyboard at a laptop. I intended to write down the stories in a simple way, in the same way I told them to my daughters. I told Abigail the story about Mrs. Lazybee and her rather sinister cottage and the unfortunate effect of eating too much really good home-baked food and too many English breakfasts. And when I came to write that in the book, I couldn't put it down like that. It was as if I had to write it down as a novel. I had to start it properly at the beginning and set the scene. I had to put it in more grown-up language because Abigail was very young at that time. I couldn't actually, it wouldn't type. When I started writing down the first line of the book, which is the crow listened and obeyed, I couldn't start anywhere else. I went to type something different. I tried on other things, but I just couldn't get it to come. So I find that the stories have a life of their own. They had one life when I was talking to my daughters and another life when I typed. And that's how the book came about. If I was to pick out one, I would say that there is meaning, there is truth, and there is meaning in this world, and it's worth pursuing. Tolkien talked about a principle. I forget the exact words he used, but he talked about the idea that when things get very, very bad, when things seem to be at their worst, that often the opposite of a catastrophe happens, that things will suddenly correct and suddenly will become good. Now, he focused on the idea that you were pursuing the truth when you were doing that you weren't getting yourself further into trouble by being foolish or wrong or pursuing bad things. But he said, as you pursue the truth, even if it seems the whole universe is rising against you, there'll come a moment when it suddenly all just changes around and things get better. Catastrophe, I think he called it. That would be the core idea. It's worth the journey. It is worth the journey. Somebody out there loves you.